Hello everyone, welcome to another video on Shadow War Armageddon. This time I'm going to cover some of my personal favourite rules from 2nd edition 40k, Necromunda and the update that have made their way into the Shadow War Armageddon rulebook, and just basically go over some different talking points, how the game works and how you can try and get the most from this rule set, and basically get the most from playing the game, and how it's going to be different from what we're used to, especially if you've never played old Necromunda or any of the older Games Workshop games. So first off, I'm going to go through the movement phase. Obviously it functions in a similar way that you move your models, pretty simple, but everyone now has a movement characteristic. Mostly it's going to be 4 if they stick with the usual rules that old 40k followed. So movement 4 is your standard, so it's a little bit less than what you're used to if you've been playing regular 40k for the last 10 years. But it does do enough, especially when you consider now that charging or running are options. So obviously if you run, you double your movement characteristic. You're charging, the same thing kind of happens. Then we've got some interesting rules which I personally really like, are the hiding rules. So if you can be obstructed behind terrain, you can then hide. So you'll get the hidden token, it's going to come in the box and stuff like that. And you can then not be shot because you're in hiding. If you can move, for example, if you have a wall and your model is popped up behind the wall, you can, as long as you can continue to move along that wall, you remain hidden. So, especially with the type of terrain they're going to be putting out, there's going to be lots of fun stuff you can do. You're going to find that Necromunda or Shadow War Armageddon is a game that relies on having a full, good value gaming table. So, having the 3 or 4 pieces of terrain just isn't going to cut it anymore, which is brilliant that the box comes with so much really nice, interesting terrain. And obviously there's lots of stuff out there that we can do. But you're going to get more value out of your games if you're playing with more of this terrain, because the way it interacts with these rules is really strong. And then any other movement rules I always liked. That should be it for now. Then we'll look at shooting rules. Obviously we now have hit modifiers again, so your basic to hit table is still the rule at 7. So you take your ballistic skill, if it's 4, you minus it from 7, and you've got 3, that's what you need to hit. Ballistic skill 3, you need 4s to hit. That's how I've been teaching people to play 40k or fantasy or any of the Games Workshop D6 based systems for a very long time. Count back from 7 and that's what you need to hit. But we do have to hit modifiers, which ties in with the weapon rules now, where they're going to have short and long ranges. So this is really interesting. It's kind of reminiscent of the rapid fire range for bolt guns, but doesn't quite function the same way. It's not always obviously exactly half or 12 inches or whatever. Each weapon is going to be different, but normally weapons are going to have a range of better at shooting at. So you could have a ballistic skill 3 Ganger, or more likely a Imperial Guardsman. He can be shooting, so normally need a 4 to hit, but he's shooting with a sniper rifle, which is going to give him bonuses at long range. Shooting with pistols, they normally get good bonuses at close range. So you're going to be able to build your squads around this kind of range of fire. So again, another interesting facet to the game. Also, Overwatch is back, so you'll be used to it slightly, especially if you've been playing a recent edition of 40k, where if you get charged, you get your fire. But Overwatch is back in its traditional sense, where if somebody moves past your line of fire, you get to take a shot at them. It costs you a shot in the shooting phase to go into Overwatch, but it's well worth it if you've got someone with a heavy bolter or something that can throw down a lot of sustained fire. Just the fear of shutting down that zone is going to be really strong. So anyone who's played Infinity, that kind of game with the ARO fire, we're going to be used to this kind of thing, and it's really strong, and again ties back into terrain. Can't say enough, guys, terrain's going to be essential for this game, especially if you want to maximise your enjoyment of being able to play it or run any kind of combat gang. You're going to need terrain to get across the table. Then we've mentioned combat, so we'll move straight into there. Combat is completely different now. If you're not used to this individualistic combat system, I know that Strange Aeons is a game that uses a similar system at the moment. Obviously, I've played 40k 2nd edition, Necromunda, both editions, so I'm used to this kind of combat system. And I think it really does a good job of representing an opponent fighting another opponent. So what happens now is you have an opposed roll-off, and you compare your values, and whoever wins gets the number of hits they won by against their opponent with the weapons they're carrying. So if you're holding 2 knives, you're going to get your extra attack for having a second knife. So you roll your 2 dice, add your weapon skill, your opponent's going to do the same. You'll compare results, and then if you've got 3 hits, you'll alternate left, right, left, or whatever, but it's up to you which way you start. We alternate the hits between the 2 weapons you're holding, and then you do the roll to wound and everything as normal, how we're used to. And whilst in 2nd edition 40k, it started to get to bog down the game really, which is why it changed. In this system, where you're looking at a very small number of models and limited combat engagements, it's really strong. It gets you really into that feel of one person trying to fight off their opponents. And I still tell a story to this day about playing games with an Imperial Guard sergeant. He was fighting off, I think it was 5 Hormagaunts he managed to fight off, and killed 3 of them and got tied down for the last 2. And it's really dramatic. It tells a story when you're talking about these games. I was thinking about it after the last video I did on Shadow War, where we're doing the competition on the last video for the giveaways. And I got people to tell me the stories of their favourite things that have happened in the games, and it really made me smile, because especially I play a lot of X-Wing at the moment, and if you get people telling you stories about X-Wing, it normally relies upon, so I rolled these hit dice and he rolled those evade dice. When you're telling these kind of stories, you're telling the story of a guy doing the fighting, and it's so enjoyable, and you really feel like you're telling the story, and it's what Games Workshop games have always tried to be about. It isn't a competitive me beating you in a game, it's telling a story of what's happening in the game. And you can be competitive whilst you're playing it, but just the fun you can have, and the narrative sense and the cinematic feel of what's happening with the dice rolls is so easy to tie into the story. And you'll find yourself, if you're used to playing these other types of games, when you tell a story from playing Shadow War Armageddon, you're going to tell it slightly differently, and that's the joy of this game for me. Then I think the last thing I wanted to cover before I do a series of videos on the different gangs was just a couple of the different advanced rules and stuff. So we've still got like jumping across, spraying shots, exploding weapons for if you roll 1s and things like that. The psychology rules are still classic, so I suppose those bear a little bit of going into. So for psychology, it's completely different to what you're used to. People run away if they're scared. You can like cut them down really easily. If you hate someone, it boosts your leadership characteristic. Frenzy, you lose control of where you're trying to position the model. And again, it's all really thematic rules that help in this cinematic storytelling when you're playing the game, but it just adds that extra layer of depth. So that's it for the basic rules. I'm going to do a series of videos breaking down the different gangs or army lists for now. And what I'll probably do is try and do a separate video as well on how you can tie in the old gangs and what kind of units fit best with them. Because I'm desperately trying to figure out a way of how I'm going to field my ratskins, what rules I'm going to use for them as counts as. But for now, that's it. Thanks for watching this video, everyone, and hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you again on the next one.